Well, good evening to you. I have a big pile of books tonight. Well, there's specific reasons for each of those. So continuing our exploration of breath meditation, I'm going to start with just a little bit finishing up this book from China, Zhi Yi's book, which is the 6 Gateways to the Sublime. You'll see why I don't want to spend long on it, but I do want to go through the last steps. And then I want to come to the 19th century and Southern Asia in the 19th century and look at the evolution of breath meditation in Southern Asia in the 19th century. Because that's largely how it comes to us in the US, is what happened during that period of time. We'll go through a lot of the history, and we'll come to more contemporary stuff. All right, so first, 6 Dharma Gates to the Sublime. So you will recall, most people will recall, last year will recall, 6 gateways are counting, following, stabilizing, contemplating, then turning and looking inward, and then purifying. So there are 10 chapters, and we look at each of the 6 gates in each of these 10 chapters in different ways. So in the first few chapters we went through, he looked at what each of these gates is and how he practiced the gates. He looked at practicing with them in sequence as one follows the other. He looked at them as inclusive. He looked at them in lots of different ways. In chapter 7, in differences, how they're practiced with different kinds of person. He looked at them as particular cures for particular obstacles in our practice, particular hindrances. Then one of these gates would be the appropriate gate. Chapter 7, he looked at them in accordance with the reverse direction, which is to say, so you've already had your experience of original nature. Now you come back from that to the convention. So we're no longer practicing with these to wake up, had the awakening experience, and now go back the other way to come back and live in the world from the place of that awakening experience. Since that's chapter 7, you can see why I don't really want to spend a huge amount of time on the last 3, because they get pretty subtle. But I do want to explain what he just give you a taste of what he's talking about, because it really is profoundly, well, it's really profound. And I think it's, I hope you'll find it really meaningful. So chapter 8, the 6 gates according to contemplation of the mind. The point of this, it looks at each of the 6 and he says, each of these is entirely mine. It's entirely mine. There is a Buddhist tradition that was founded by Sangha Vasubandhu in 4th century, 5th century, Yogacara, Chittamatra, Vijnana Matra, mind only, consciousness only, which is precisely about this. Everything is mind only. What I see here, what is this? It is entirely a creation of my mind. What I experience, not the reality, but the experience, what is here, is entirely mind only. There is no reality today, not reality. There is no reality. It is all mind. It is all mind. So what he's saying is, and I'll read one of them. Take, for example, when one first begins to study contemplation of the mind. Contemplation of the mind. One realizes that all of the worldly and mundane methods for enumeration all come forth entirely from the mind. All attempts, everything around counting is generated by the mind. There's no such thing. One. What is one? It's all mind. The move to think about one, the idea of enumerating, the identifying of an object to be counted, the attributes, the qualities of the object to be counted, in this case, the breath. All of those things are generated by the mind, or come forth from the mind. And that, apart from the mind, there does not exist even one single additional Dharma, nothing but the mind. This being the case, then, in enumerating all Dharmas, in every case there is an instance of enumeration done in concert with the mind. One should realize that it is the mind itself which constitutes the gateway of counting. Does this for the other 5 gates. So this is a practice of, as one is meditating on and with the breath, recognizing with full awareness that everything that is happening around this somatic experience of counting breaths is mine. It's the 8th one. And that comes up, we can do that in lots of different ways. When you practice, if you were to practice direct contemplation of a sense, hearing, close your eyes and listen. If you listen to my voice, for example, everything you're hearing is your mind. You're hearing words. Those words don't really exist. The construction of words is entirely in your mind. And it's so quick, you don't think about it. The mind just automatically generates these words. That's what you think you're hearing. The sound that makes up the word, the time within which the words land, entirely made up by your mind. The senses do not experience time, they just experience now. The mind creates the time. So the idea of these mental objects in the past and anticipating future ones, so that the language makes sense, all mind. Even the sounds, the quality of sound that you hear, that you turn into words, it's entirely habit-based. When you were an infant, you didn't hear sounds like that. It was mysterious. You trained yourself to hear sounds. All mind. So this chapter 8 is all about that. So 6 gates, so chapter 9 is the 6 gates according to the perfect contemplation. The perfect contemplation is within a single thought, one distinguishes the number of all form and mind. This is counting. The number of all form and mind dharmas of all common persons. In every case, everything manifests like reflections which do not abide either inwardly or outwardly, and which are neither singular nor differentiated. What comes to mind is, as I bring this one up, is the koan, which is when Huineng was wondering, he was not yet recognized as a teacher, he's not yet teaching. And there were 2 monks he came across who were arguing. The flag was waving in the wind. And one monk said, the flag's moving. The other monk said, no, it's not. It's not the flag that moves. It's the wind that's moving. The flag is still in relationship to the wind. It's the wind that's moving. Going back and forth. And Huineng said, guys, it's not the wind, it's not the flag. It's your mind that's moving. Which correlates to what I just said, but it also all dharmas, everything shows up interconnected. So this is what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. It's such an incredible interconnection of everything. This book, if you look at this book, you can actually see the whole universe in this book. Made of paper. Paper is sun, water, earth, time, people who made it, people who printed it, machines that were made. All of that stuff is stardust, ultimately. All of that stardust came from supernovae billions of years ago, in turn from the Big Bang. The whole universe is in this book. Couldn't exist without the whole universe. And vice versa, you take this out, the whole universe doesn't exist. It's all incredibly interconnected. And the 10th chapter, the 6 gates according to signs of realization. He goes through the 9 previous chapters and each of the 6 gates in each of those 9 chapters and says, if you contemplate this clearly and see it clearly, that itself is waking up. That is realization. Each one of these previous 54 gates, 54 practices, is a practice of liberation. So, I've read another bunch of stuff out of this book, and if you want to think of it in these terms, there are 60 different meditations in this book. It's a little book, 140 pages, of which 70 are Chinese and 70 are English. So it's a 70-page book. And so there are 10 chapters, each with each of these 6 gates. And there is a meditation practice for each of those 6 gates within each one of these 10 approaches. This is a really, really subtle, profound meditation that includes everything from baby steps to full awakening and explains that they're really no different from each other. It's truly just an extraordinary text. That's how breath meditation went to China. And this informs Zhi Yi and his 4 texts, of which this is one, 4 basic practice texts, informed pretty much everything that came after as you go across into East Asia. So all of the Chan tradition, all of Zen, all of the Pure Land stuff, it all was influenced by this. And then that comes across to the West and to us through Chan, Zen mostly. There's another broad arc that comes to us, which I won't go to spend time on, which is the Tibetan one, because I don't really know that so well. But the other arc that comes to us, and this is where I'm now going to go back and then forward again, is the arc that comes out of Southern Asia. And that comes to us in the Insight tradition and a number of other traditions. So I'm going to follow that the next 2 or 3 weeks and not get into it in detail, but tease out of it points that I think are important for our practice, broad points that I think are important for our practice. As I work through this, I'm going to use this book, which is Breathing Mindfulness, Discovering the Riches at the Heart of the Buddhist Path by Sarah Shaw. And the subtext here is an exploration of the history and methods of breath meditation from the earliest suttas to contemporary insight practice. So she does a lot of historical stuff, and I'll step through some of that. It's a little bit of a refresher because we did some of this earlier, but there's some points I want to make sure we remember and probably bring out a little bit more freshly. And then she spends time in Thailand, and then in Myanmar, and then brings that forward. So this week I'm going to stay with Thailand. Next week we'll talk about Myanmar and the practices coming out of Myanmar, and then we'll wrap this up. And then after that, this book along. This looks a lot like the one we just looked at in the same series, translated by the same guy. It's the same format, facing Chinese and English pages. I'm really excited about doing this. This is called The Essentials of Buddhist Meditation. It's also by Zhi Yi. And it is an incredibly thorough, it's very compact, and it's 200 pages. So it's 100 pages in English. Very compact, but it is a really, really thorough practice. everything you could ever want to know about practice right here. So we'll step through that. But for now, we're going to stay with breath meditation. So, introductory quote. Introductory section is looking at the diversity of breath meditation. So if you go back to the Pali Canon, what we have in the Pali Canon is the Anapanasati Sutta. That's the central breath meditation. And we have the Satipatthana Sutta. Anapanasati is basically in-breath, out-breath. That's the 16 tetrahedrons. Breath, feeling, tones, body. Breath, feeling, tones, mind, and then dharma. The Satipatthana is the one that it's the same 4 chunks, not so clearly focused on breath, but when it looks at the body, it has the corpse meditations. It has the body as like a whole bunch of unattractive things full of mung beads and all sorts of other things. So there are a number of other suttas, but those are the primary ones, and everything kind of points in at those as the primary texts. Very thorough, but lots of open ends. And so when you're understanding those, you have to look in lots of other places. So as it comes down through the centuries, it's profoundly ambiguous. So we have these 3 quotes. This one is Buddhadasa. For example, and these are contemporary-ish. For example, we can feel the long and the short breath of the breath, short duration of the breath. Thus we learn naturally about the long breath and the short breath. We can observe the coarse, fine nature of the breath. Further, we can observe its smoothness and bumpiness. We contemplate the different kinds of breath, long and short, coarse and fine, easy and uneasy. Begin to observe the various kinds of experiencing them with sati, which is mindfulness, recollection. We must learn to observe in greater detail, that is, to observe the reaction or influence of each on different kind of breathing, each kind of breathing. Do they cause, etc.? So this is very subtle, very open, very exploratory, very gentle, very loose. It's coming from the breathing in long. I know I'm breathing in long, breathing in short. I know I'm breathing in long. So just pay attention to your breathing. Notice the qualities. Tune in on them. And then we have this. There are 7 basic steps. Start out with 3 or 7 long and in and out breaths. Thinking but with the in breath and do with the out. But do. Be clearly aware of each breath. And then observe the breath as it goes in and out, noticing whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable, broad or narrow, obstructed or free-flowing, fast or slow, short or long, warm or cool. If the breath doesn't feel comfortable, change it until it does. For instance, if breathing in long and out long is uncomfortable, try breathing in and out short. As soon as you find breathing that feels comfortable, let this comfortable breath sensation spread to different parts of the body. To begin with, inhale the breath sensation at the base of the skull and let it flow all the way down the spine. So on. So this is Ajahn Lee. Ajahn Lee was a student of a guy, he was a student of Ajahn Mun, who was one of the most influential of the Thai forest masters. And Ajahn Lee was Ajahn Fong's teacher, and Ajahn Fong was Ajahn, what's his name? Ajahn Jeff. Ajahn Jeff, he goes. Thanissaro Bhikkhu. We've got plenty of Thanissaro's books on the shelves over there. And when I go to the Pali, Thai forest teachings, I tend to go to Thanissaro's teachings. So this very different feel. Buddhadasa, also Thai forest, also in that same Ajahn Mun tradition. Very open, very exploratory, very loose. Ajahn Lee, very tight, very controlling. With the instruction that you're working to try different things until you find comfort in your breath. And stay with the comfort. Very different set of instructions. And then we come to Nyanaponika Thera, who is another very well-known teacher, he wrote, "The Heart of Buddhist Meditation," which is one of the contemporary classics. For mindfulness of breathing, the lotus posture and crossed legs is preferable, though not of absolute necessity. We have also given a warning not to interfere with the breath in any way. In Buddhist practice, there should be no holding or stopping of the breath, no deliberate deepening, nor attempts to force it into a definite time rhythm. The only task here is to follow the natural flow of the breath mindfully and continuously, without a break or without an unnoticed break. The point where one should fix one's attention is the nostrils against which the breathing air strikes, and one should not leave that point of observation, because here one can easily check the entry and exit of the breath, and so on. Another very different approach. So all I'm doing here is I'm pointing out the incredible diversity. These are just 3 approaches. Contemporary, relatively contemporary, in the 20th century teachers who were drawing from the same basic teachings. They're approaching it in such different ways, which can be really wonderful and also really difficult. Leads to the big question, which we talked about before. You've got 16 steps. How do they work together? How do we work with these 16 steps? Breathing in, breathing out, long, short. Experiencing the body, experiencing the breath body, calm in the breath. And we move to the feeling tones. Rapture, pleasure, experiencing the feeling tones, calming the feeling tones. And then the mind, experiencing the mind, gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind, liberating the mind. These are 16 steps. How do we work with these 16 steps? And each of these different traditions has a different way of doing it. So I go to Tanisra's, but the other person I'll talk about later is Ajahn Chah. Tanisra and Ajahn Chah and Buddhadasa. I like. So those are 3 I work with: Buddhadasa, Tanisra, and Ajahn Chah. And there are so many others out there. But each of those 3, Tanisra, Buddhadasa, and Ajahn Chah, has a very different approach. Buddhadasa says start at step 1, work all the way through. Tanisra says the 4 tetrads each do really the same thing. So you just overlay the 4 tetrads and it's experiencing through the calming. But each of the 4 tetrads, so they're really overlaying each other. Imagine Ajahn Chah kind of blows the whole thing off in a different way. So that's a big question. How do we practice it? There are some common themes. One is this, there's a word chanda. Chanda is really important. It's a Pali word that kind of means desire, but it's a word we really don't have in English. It almost means like aspiration. It's a healthy desire. So when we're practicing, something has to give us the momentum to keep going. We need to have something that pushes us forward. And we all know that craving is the problem. Craving is desire. I want something. That's the problem. Me, the self. This self doesn't exist. What happens is craving arises. And craving becomes the self. Everything you think of as a me is actually your desires hardened. If you look into everything you can place your finger on and say, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's what I define as me. You're holding on to something. Let that go, and what's there? Nothing. Nothing. Quality, the experiences there, the holding on is the problem. It's what causes the me, and it's that holding on, and it's me that causes the suffering. And so that is the problem. So how do we let go of that? How do we free ourselves? there's this word chanda, which shows up. And aspiration is probably the best translation I've come across. And it's much more gentle. It's a healthy, gentle desire. And it sets a direction. It sets an intention. But it's not one that holds on. So there's this dance we play when we practice. This is a word that shows up in all of these Southern Asian breath meditation practices. It's this gentle desire, this chanda, wish, desire, willingness. A wish to pursue or undertake something from a skillful base or simply because it is good. So the wish for all beings to be happy would be an example of chanda. Right? So the wish for me to be more skillful in the world so that I cause less suffering will be chanda. It's not self-centered, not for my own sake so I'm happy. It's so that I'm less abrasive, I cause less harm. Totally different way of approaching desire. It's not for me, it's for everybody else. And it has to truly be for everybody else, because a lot of the time we say, I want to bring on red clay. We're in red clay. I want red clay to be successful, so I'm going to make a financial donation. But I want to do it in a way that's visible, so people know I've been generous. It's about me. It's not about the organization at all, right? I want to help that person, but I'm going to wait till there's other people around so they see me helping. That's not chanda. The other word is tanha, which is thirst. That's thirst, which leads to this self-thing and this me. So chanda is truly wanting something just because it's good, just because it's right. And this is where the bodhisattva expression of Buddhism is such a healthy expression. Because if truly lived, then our life is to wake up for the benefit of all beings. We are seeing the suffering in the world and we're waking up to relieve suffering in the world. It's not for me, it doesn't matter. It's suffering in the world. And it's not just to relieve the suffering of my friends and family, it's everything, universal. That's an aspiration. Right? So that's an important point that shows up in all of these Pali teachings. To the page here. Oh, I know I did this. Yes. So this is sort of pulling from the early teachings and looking at some of the principles that come forward out of the early teachings. You may recall we talked about Buddha Ghosha and the Path of Purification. That's a Sri Lankan 5th century text, which it has the quality of the Bible for the Sri Lankan tradition. I mean, it's like the motherlode of all the philosophical and doctrinal teachings. It's all pulled together. It's all the different practices are listed and itemized there. There were a number of manuals, like Um, there's another one called The Path to Freedom, Vimutti Marga, by Arhat Upatissa, which actually does not exist in the Pali anymore. It was translated into Chinese and it exists in the Chinese. And we'll find this with a lot of stuff. Chinese was such an administratively heavy culture. They did just incredible numbers of translations, often many translations, and the originals of texts have been lost when they exist in 3 Chinese translations done at 200-year intervals. Fascinating stuff. Chinese culture. And the Indian culture was very sloppy with its texts and with its history. It didn't matter. It just didn't matter. So that's not how they saw them. So we went through these different doctrinal texts, different ways of pulling those Pali teachings together and practicing those teachings. Went through all the Abhidharma texts, which is part of the same tradition in the same few 100-year period. And then we went into periods in each of these Southern Asian countries from 400 or 500 CE through to today, where each of these countries became Buddhist, developed their own Buddhist practices. And in many cases, it died out, and when it went back to Sri Lanka, and it was refreshed, and then it died out in Sri Lanka, and the Thai people went to Sri Lanka and renewed it there, and there was back and forth. But each was building its own indigenous tradition. And they were extraordinarily different indigenous traditions. I'll give you a little taste here of the Thai indigenous tradition. 300-400 years ago, it would have been probably the same for over 1,000 years. And then, 300 or 400 years ago, it looked like this. Boran meditations are the oldest lineages in Southeast Asia. There are traditions recorded in Sri Lanka, evidence in modern regions of old Burma, and so forth, known as esoteric, tantric, or pre-reform Theravada. Place the practices of calm and insight with a distinctive ritual and narrative framework, accompanied by a complex array of techniques, charts, body mapping, symbols, and the magical use of letters from the alphabet. Sacred language, correspondences between the macrocosm and the microcosm, substitution of qualities to represent dharmas, initiations and esoteric readings of traditional canonical texts. Totally different than anything we'd recognize as breath meditation in this country today. That's what it was. So then we come forward, and there was, what was his name? King. Can't remember the name of the king, so it doesn't matter. You can look him up if you're interested. I meant to bring this with me and I didn't. But there was a king in early 19th century Thailand. At that time in Thailand, Buddhism, so we're now moving to Thailand, exclusively to Thailand. Buddhism in Thailand had become really intellectual. In the monasteries, they were very much Abhidharma based, and they had reached the conclusion that we were in the Dharma ending age. Awakening was just not possible. So it would decline and decline and decline. The teacher would eventually completely vanish, and when it completely vanished, Maitreya Buddha would come in 6 billion years or something. And so that's where we were. Practice was. And there was a king. Early 19th century, he said, this is BS. Don't believe a word of it. And he went out into the forests, all the way close to the Laos border. And he started practicing and seriously practicing, and other people gathered in this practice tradition. And they practiced and practiced, and they went back to what they thought were the really old original teachings, the Pali teachings, threw all the other stuff out, and they went back just to this breath meditation. And that is the birth of the Thai forest tradition. 200 years ago. Didn't exist before that. There's some luminaries grew out of it. And one of those was Ajahn Sao. One of his students was Ajahn Mun. Ajahn Mun Bodhisattva. So if you read anything about Thai forest practice, you will come very quickly to the name Ajahn Mun Bodhisattva. He was like the central pivot point in which all Buddhist Thai forest practice comes in Thailand. Don't have his dates, but they were. Oh, I do have his dates. No, I have Sal's dates, 1859 to 1946. So Mun's dates are going to be here somewhere. Here we go. Mun, 1870 to 1949. So that's really, so these two guys, 1859 to 1942, and then 1870 to 1949. That's when Thai forest Buddhism emerged. And there are three figures. I told you the three figures that I follow. Oh, that's right. What Ajahn Mun recognized in a lot of emerging practices in which he reacted against was he recognized, and this will come up next week when we look at the Burmese practices in a big way. He recognized that there was a skew towards insight practice, leaving the calming practice behind. You recall shamatha and vipassana. We balance shamatha and vipassana. Shamatha is the calming. It's what feels good. Everything becomes peaceful. Everything becomes still. The mind slows down. It feels great. All these somatic pleasure experiences come out. It feels great. But if we just stay in that experience, all we're doing is enjoying the day at the beach. Nothing changes. We've learned how to make that happen. So when we're in a difficult place, we can kind of check out, come back to that really peaceful place. Other thing that matters is insight, which is seeing how this works, how the habits arise in this. In the East Asian tradition, it's really focused on just our habit patterns and the storehouse, and consciousness. In the Southern Asian traditions, it's 12-link chain of causation. So you look at the rise of feeling tones from contact, and then the craving that arises out of these positive, negative, neutral feeling tones. It's the same basic practice. It's understanding how this system has been trained and retraining it, breaking those deeply conditioned arisings of emotion and out of the emotion physiological response. So this is the insight practice. And when we're elevated, it's hard to do it. You can't do it. It's hidden. So we've got to be calm to do it. So we've got to practice calm and insight. And there's that lovely story I told you. Ajahn Brahm, who's a contemporary Australian, who says, Mr. Vipassana, Mr. Vipassana, Mrs. Shamatha, they want to go up that mountain, and Mr. Vipassana thinks the views are going to be really great. And Mrs. Shamatha thinks it's going to be so peaceful. So they put on their backpacks and they hold hands and they walk up the mountain together. And you know what? The views are spectacular. And it's really peaceful. So they both got what they wanted, and they got the other side too. These two practices, calm and insight, they work naturally together, cultivate them naturally together. To over-bias one way or the other is to skew ourselves. And that's what we do at the beginning of every Thursday session, and generally last period on Sundays. And this is I get from Guagu, in Florida. Is this progressive body relaxation? So we calm the body, drop the energy down, relax, get out of the head, into the body, relax. Shamatha, stay calm, but alert, not dull. Staying alert. Bring great interest on our method, and our method, staying with our method, is what allows us to cultivate insight, to be present when stuff happens and see it happen. Say, oh, I do that, don't I? Thank you. Expose one of these links in the chain, expose one of these habit patterns. So now I know what to do when it comes up in the world. Practicing calm and insight at the same time. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to have to pick up the rest of the Thai stuff next week because I've just been garrulous here. So we'll do more of this next week. And right now I'll stop recording and we'll talk for a few minutes.